City of Coral Gables Commission.
Pleasure. How are you, David? Javier Banos. Yeah, in the different setting today as a candidate. I get to be the candidate today.
That's awesome. Yeah, exactly. You get to see. I've actually had occasion sometimes to get, and it's nice. It's nice to see the other side of getting interviewed.
It's unusual to be on this side of the screen.
I'm glad you're here, and it's funny because there was a letter from Mayor.
Yes.
Raul Valdez Fowley, published in the community newspaper, whose offices we're in for.
He did not like what I said.
But it was interesting because it made me think of the pressure of being, because he disagreed vehemently with some things that came up in your show.
I'll tell you this. You got to give it to him in the sense that he's not shy at giving you his opinion. Okay? If you're going to be in public office, and this is something you have an knack for, criticism has to be, you have to have a very, very strong shield, or you have to very thick skin, because you're asking to be a target for every opinion out there. And I think, he has shown, perhaps, I don't know if it's his age or the time he's been in office, but he doesn't appreciate criticism that much, which is an awkward thing for somebody who has, positioned himself to be the face of a public institution.
It's interesting you say it, because I find it interesting. Yeah, he does, and I think that's also his personality. It's almost, he's so snarky about it.
Yeah.
And like I found it interesting through the process of I've seen a lot of his responses to, these are voters, right? And it will be like, congratulations on your newfound, interest in community affairs.
Right.
Or it's always like a snipe at their legitimacy.
Right.
Like, why are you questioning me?
He berates them a little bit. Again, I've told him
you're not running against him.
I'm not running against him.
Exactly.
Right?
I get it.
He's out of office. He's served his time. He won't be mayor past April.
And you're not running against his brother.
I'm not running against his brother. So, but you have to understand, the Valdez Fowley family is Cuban royalty, as much as you could have Cuban royalty, right? So, there were an aristocratic family in Cuba. We have a sandwich named after them. Elena Ruth Valdez Fowley. And it is understood. I can comprehend when you come with a background, when that is what is part of your lineage, of your ethos as a family, some take a little umbrage to the fact that you're being criticized. But by the same token, we don't have kings in the United States. We came here, we didn't leave us there, and this particular country tends to take a particular different perspective on criticizing politicians. I think if Jerry Falwell could criticize, could be criticized by Hustler magazine, so can he. And
it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because I think that we're in the offices of a community newspaper, and what they always do, which I think is so interesting, is they just take that letter from the mayor, and they publish it. Great. And it's just like the exchange of ideas. Like I find it very. I find that very healthy. I like that. Like, we're both lawyers. The battlefield of ideas, I think, is so important, That's one thing I want to talk to you about, is a little bit about, one of the things that I'm passionate about is we can disagree. We're going to disagree in a lot of things, but what we can agree on is process. I think in a lot of times.
That I am with you.
And I think that we're seeing within the city of Coral Gables some frustration with the process.
Right. Look, here's part of the reason I'm running, and part of what I would like to do. Part of my experience with government has always been that you need to have an open process. You need to have a situation in which you bring the residents in and you give them an explanation. They may disagree with you, and that's perfectly fine. They may give you a different perspective. They may have misunderstandings. They may not have all the information in. But if you make people participants of the process, if you give them an in, they will ultimately, because we live in a democracy in which, public discourse is part and parcel of what we have embraced, they will ultimately understand the decision and accept it better. If you don't give people information, you don't give them the tools, if it seems, even if it's just the perception, which eventually becomes a reality, that you try in an underhanded way to do things not in the sunshine, right? Not within the light that is required by our statutes. And simply because it's expedient, okay? Simply because it makes better sense, simply because it's better for contributors, simply because it so happens to coincide with the vision of the city is, ultimately you're going to get a backlash. And I think what you're going to see in this election, and I think what I've seen as a groundswell and a backlash to some of the ways that the city staff and the city itself has done some of the work, which it's just completely deaf to the fact that you need to bring people into the process. You need to make it open. You need to send them mailers. The whole idea of giving notice is not simply because it's a check in the box, right? The whole idea of giving notice, even if you get folks opposing what you're trying to do, is to make sure that everyone is involved, that the people are actually part of, are actually answerable, that you're answerable to the people. And we're not getting that, or at least in my perspective, respectfully to the members of the commission, the staff, and some of them. I think Commissioner Lago in particular is very good at trying to inform folks, and so is Commissioner Force. But some of the commission has done things that I'm not proud of.
Tell me about, on that note of where you go from there to deciding to run.
Right.
You have a very long history of public service.
That's true.
And I want to kind of extract some of that out, because you've done a lot of the dirty work. I think as we talk about the roles that you've served in, these are not the cushy, high profile, show up at the groundbreaking things. Like, you've been in the nitty gritty of the pension system in South Miami. Yeah. You've served on the Bayfront.
I serve for the Bayfront Park Trust today. I served in the city of Coral Gables pension retirement plan. I served in the city of Miami civil service system. And I served here in the city of South Miami as well when I lived here. And I like public service. I think this is something that, if you're going to be a true citizen of this country, and I was bestowed with that immense privilege when I immigrated here, then you should embrace the full nature of what it is to be a citizen. Okay, and what the full nature of what it means that it's your obligation to be involved, to understand what the process is, and to understand how it works and why it works. And if you have something to offer, if you have something to bring it in, you absolutely should be present and should raise your hand to volunteer. I saw that there was something that I could do with my knowledge as an accountant, as an attorney, to bring my voice and to bring my experience into the pension system. I think we did an excellent job in this city. I think there's a lot of work to be done in the city of Coral Gables that I still want to do from the commission. And, it's the stewardship of these institutions is what makes our government work.
I want to ask you about that on the level of, I hear a lot of frustration from Coral Gables residents that they like Coral Gables the way it is, and Coral Gables is changing into something they don't like.
That's true.
And I think that's a big part of this election. And the question, what I have heard, and I'd like to ask you if you know what your opinion of this is, because you know more about the pensions than many of us, is there are politicians who agree with that, but we're facing an unprecedented financial challenge.
That's absolutely true.
Part of which is the pensions, the city pensions, and the city salaries. And that can be addressed in one of two ways. It can be addressed by cutting city salaries, tightening the belt on the city side. And they're saying you can't do that, that the unions will just make you unelectable. So to get elected, you cannot advocate for that. And the only way out is to build our way out of it. The only way out is demolish Miracle Mile, build 7 stories. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I don't necessarily believe that the unions have that much sway in the politics of the city, but I think they do have a lot of power, because one of the things folks don't understand is that when you have a unionized workforce, when you have a civil service system that has a functional agreement between the city and what the folks that are part of your workforce do, you have to comply with the contracts. You have made promises. They're enforceable, as you very well understand that as an attorney. They're enforceable contracts between the unionized workforce and the city. And it's very difficult for them to sort of brush that aside and sort of unilaterally make changes, even if they're changes that are required because the finances are not there. You have this legacy cost that is unfortunately are part of a lot of local governments in Florida, but also an albatross to the fluidity of the financials of the city that eventually become the cities have had to file bankruptcy because of them. It is not the solution to build our way out of it. Because part of what you're doing is you're creating this own vicious cycle. If you build more, if you build higher, if you build with more density, if you bring more traffic, you need more officers, you need more civil servants, you need more firefighters. So we will never get out of this vicious cycle because you need the immediacy of today. I think there are concrete things that can be done to modify the plan. There are ways in which we can refinance it that we have. I think we have to be honest about what we can afford. And I think one of the things that needs to happen is the benefit structure that is granted as we go along, needs to be controlled, because the commission ultimately is the decision maker when it comes to what benefits are granted, and how those union contracts are negotiated prospectively. And then the second aspect of it is, we need to stop promising this pension plan, as something that going forward. It is maybe not for police officers and firefighters because they're somewhat of a unique benefit, but for general employees, this promise is one step too far. There are other alternatives: 401ks, 403bs, 457. You can do all sorts of things to provide a sound, good retirement for these folks. It doesn't have to be a system in which we are essentially indebting our city for all of its history by virtue of giving a benefit that, quite honestly, is just not existent in the private sector.
I like that. I like that you have the pension background, do it. It's interesting. One of the things that you have is you have experience outside of Coral Gables. You worked in South Miami. You're very extensively involved in the city of Miami.
Right.
You are a relative of Joe Carollo.
My mother, if you want to call it that, my mother-in-law's is his direct cousin.
Is that right? That's interesting.
So I've been doing Joe's taxes for like 12 years before he was commissioner, when he was in the city of Doral managing it. So I never thought he was going to win it. So to be honest, when I volunteered to do his accounting, but he's proven, he's clearly a local controversial figure. But and I'm not, no,
and I know that's not where I know. You don't have to defend that at all. That's not my point. Is I wanted to kind of more talk about your philosophy. Right. I have legal battles with Joe Carollo. Those battles are not personal; they're legal issues. But I often, whenever I praise Joe Carollo, I have people that go crazy, like, "Why are you saying this?" And Joe Carollo has a certain attitude toward constituency, toward government, toward what's going on. I kind of wanted to ask you about, like, what have you learned through the different service at the city of Miami as compared to your other experiences?
Well, the Bayfront Park Trust as a park system is a unique creature of the city of Miami. It's essentially a separate institution. And we manage a very localized thing. What I've seen, a degree of skepticism that comes from Joe, and it comes from the park members, the trust, that I think is healthy in government. And to that degree, you can admire that perspective. There's not a presumption that everyone is working towards the same goal. I think he's good at sort of poking at the bear and figuring out, okay, let me see if for whatever reason this particular thing is proper, if this contract is being done, why is it being done this way? And I think that degree of healthy skepticism is something that's fundamental to serving in government.
And I got to tell you something that's interesting. Again, I'll get in trouble from people who follow me for praising Joe Croyer for something. But when the budget is up,
yes,
there's one commissioner asking the hard questions.
Yes.
And people can say, well, maybe he has maybe his motivations are off or whatever, but he does dig in unlike anybody else. I mean, even Al Crespo gives Carollo credit for being the one guy that actually reads every line of the budget, which is where all the magic happens, right? The budget is the thing.
And that's the thing. It's the nitty-gritty aspects of government. It's looking at those things that many times I look at with surprise. Our own commission, the Gables, Commissioner Lago does look at the items, but even the commission, the Gables, everything is sort of tailored. It's all prepackaged. It's just a show at the end of the day when it goes forward, because there isn't that many people asking that many questions. All the questions are asked indoors by the commission and the city manager
behind the closed doors.
It's not done in the public eye because the decisions are done that way. Now, there might be nothing nefarious happening, and that's not my intention to give that perspective. I just think that if you don't want that perception, okay, and the perception can ultimately be reality, you need to be the guy up there asking the hard questions, and at the very least, if for nothing else, so the public understand where's the money going. Okay, Gables is a wonderful place to live. It's a unique city. You have a situation where a lot of folks are just happy. They really, I was canvassing yesterday, and I had a person say, well, I really don't have any questions for you. Like, he's happy. There's no, for some other folks, especially folks who live in the periphery of the downtown, have real grievances.
Yeah.
And there's a disconnect between one part of the city and the other.
I was in a meeting last night with the Ponce neighbors.
Yes.
Who are worried. They're under siege from the Plaza development, that new Alan Morris building, and they mentioned that you'd come out and met with them.
Yeah, and I sat down with social distancing, and we were all respectful, and it was well attended, about 12 or 13 local neighbors, and the concern they have is they see this building going up, and it was actually very difficult listening to them because for whatever reason at 8:30 at night when this was going on,
the sounds of construction,
the sound of construction going on from the other project was still going on at that time, which I didn't even think that was possible. But they're truly experiencing today, the implications of the high growth of the downtown. And look, every city has to change, right? There's nothing that says that we're going to be static. If we had been the city that was in existence in the 1950s today, it really would not have the tax base and the price. So I'm not saying growth is not healthy. That's not my goal. I think if we do growth in a way that is loyal to what the founders of our city wanted to see, without some of its checkered history, but that is loyal to it's a growth that is 6, 7, 8 stories high at most, and you don't have these very tall buildings with 120 units that sort of overwhelm the periphery or the areas that are there, that just bring so much traffic and density to our neighborhoods that doesn't make it be a neighborhood.
And I got to tell you, the Ponce one, I can't tell you, Javier, the problem you have with the Gables is these people can vote with their feet.
Yes.
And there is a feeling, here's this cute little crafts neighborhood, and they live there because they love living in the Gables. And those are people that can afford to just move to Pinecrest, right? And not deal with it.
Right.
And it's like, that's not good for the city. You know what I'm saying? Like, I almost, when I see it, I'm like, this isn't a good dynamic.
And you have the Crafts neighborhood, the upzoning that they request. I walked the Craft neighborhood because I wanted to see what was it like. And some of it, I think, done by developers. It's dilapidated. I think there's some areas that I feel bad for, that has allowed to be the case. Some areas are still neighborhoods, but it's fairly small. There's some. You can do small modifications of the zoning code to encourage the development of what today exists, which is a multi-unit condominiums, not condos, townhouses
Yep.
that are at the very corner of one of the streets, which look gables. They're consistent with the character of the city. You can beautify the place so the city can put in money without having to bring this huge density that is being proposed.
And that's the thing that's interesting about that neighborhood to me is that's a very sophisticated, those people that you met with who are my clients, those are real estate brokers, lawyers, CPAs, and it's not that being a CPA or a lawyer makes you smarter than anybody, but these are not anti-development people, right? These are not activists. These are people who make their living through development.
Look, it's not necessarily an altruistic exercise for all of them. It's really a monetary, selfish perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that. Look, this is about your property values, your property. One of the reasons a lot of my Cuban brethren, came is because we wanted to enjoy the full fruition of capitalism and to really have our property rights respected. And you need to also consider that government it's a big influence on those rights. And if you are allowing this massive growth to happen next to my house, you are devaluing, you're creating an impediment for me to be able to enjoy what I've paid my hard work and my hard money to.
I think I like that perspective of. I think you really, and they appreciated it. I mean, they think they felt like you got it, and what there is. So let me change the subject a little bit I want to go back to the city of Miami. It's interesting. I was thinking about some of the dysfunction of the city of Miami, some of the challenges of the city. You serve on the Bayfront Parks thing. One of the frustrations in Miami is the torch.
Yes.
One of the frustrations is the fountain.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Like what is going on with that park? Like why can't we? I hate to do this because you're not running for City of Miami, but you serve in that commission. What the hell is going on?
Exactly about those things. Well, the fountain, like there's a perspective within the park staff and some of the other members. Remember, I'm one of a group of people, so I'm not.
And how many? How many is it?
I believe it's a total of 10 members.
10 members.
Okay. So and Joe Carollo is the ex officio member who sits as the chairman of
right.
Essentially, this is the way the ordinance is written. It's nothing more than a separate department of the city of Miami. That's what you're running. It's not really a separate office even. But what happens? We've paid. I think it was going to cost me like $30,000 to replace to put permanent gas where the light was, and I offered idea. Well, can it be a light? Can it be something that emulates the fire so that we don't have the? So that's in the works to be fixed. It should be. It was something we promoted. It should be done fairly quickly. The fountain. I have aesthetical disagreements with the board about the fountain. I think the fountain is not necessarily the prettiest thing that should be there. It probably should be modified. After my insistence and the insistence of everybody else who was there, we ended up suing FEMA for FEMA administratively suing FEMA to make sure that they paid the full balance of the Irma funds that they had to come in and to save the park because the fountain is ruined. After Irma,
right?
It has salt water came in. The fountain is not a working fountain. So the goal right now is to put, and we have received various, and actually as of the last meeting, we have received various monies to lift the entire workings of the fountain out of it and fundamentally modify the way the fountain looks. So you'll see, I think the year and a half I spent there have been very fruitful. I think the leadership of the city has taken, and the park has taken a real consciousness of what a central park like a structure this is for the city of Miami and for the broader Miami-Dade community, and that it needs to be revitalized. It needs to be put together in a way that really is something we can all be proud of. And the board understands that. The commission understands that, and the money is there, and we're taking the steps to get it there.
Tell me, what is the solution? Let me back up. So one of the disagreements you had with the mayor, or at least was in his letter, had to do with the Miracle Mile.
Yes.
He says Miracle Mile is sick.
Not necessarily disagree with him there.
I don't disagree either. It's interesting. Yeah. Look, it's like I think we all, they always say the first step is to recognize the problem. And I think we all recognize the problem. And then we have these radically different solutions. So tell me about what's your solution.
So look, I had a wonderful meeting, and it happened by coincidence with, because I went to her shop to buy in the Miracle Mile to buy some jewelry with the present president of the BID, the business improvement district.
Name names.
I'm not. So what happened is, he needs density to be brought into the downtown area, and I think it's a real solution. Okay, you need to bring people in to drive your business. The question, as it was clear, it's how do you do that? Okay, what is the best way to do it in a way? Then does that mean that we should allow for essentially Miracle Mile look like Lincoln Road? I'm not a proponent of that. I don't think that is the solution. I think we could, you could allow for a modification of the peripheral streets.
So I want to ask you, so is it naive? I mean, to me, it's interesting because it's like, I feel almost like, is it too naive to say, no, Miracle Mile doesn't get touched. And then immediately behind Miracle Mile, we go high. And bring in housing. I think we both all agree we need to bring in housing, right?
I don't disagree with that. I think the periphery of what is our traditional downtown,
the CBD,
exactly that area. If we bring a little more growth to that, we modify the parking structures that exist today, which we point, because parking is the biggest issue, okay, to being able to be there. If you bring folks to those peripheral streets. That will be naturally be serviced by the downtown. I think you keep the historic value of it. You keep the same look that we have become accustomed to, and I think you allow this $25 million that was spent on modifying it to actually, we don't
have a chance.
Destroy it. We don't destroy it. We give it a chance to actually come to the place. Does it have to be these massive structures like what we've seen on the US 1 corridor? Not that necessarily they'd be allowed to that degree there, but do they have to? I don't think so. I think smaller housing is enough to bring the life into the area, because lately people like to walk to places. It's not. We don't have to have a car for those situations. And if you have a restaurant and you can walk to to the place 4 or 5 blocks away, you're gonna walk.
It's interesting you say it, because when I think about it, I think about what happened on Geralda, closing Geralda. Yeah. Like, that's one of my favorite places in Miami.
It is.
I love being there.
Is it going to be a closing Miracle? I think they tried to do that.
I know. That's where I'm going. I hate to say it.
I don't think it's.
Everyone fights. I don't want to put you in the spot with that, but like, everyone fights closing streets.
Hate me,
every time they close the streets, it's like everyone fights it, and then you close the street. And then it's just like this blossoming of business and foot traffic and everything happens.
But here's what happens. My office is on 31st and Coral Way. My wife drives the mile through the mile itself. Okay?
We all do. I do too.
From my house to my office. So if I do this, my marriage might be
her commute gets 4 times longer.
Might be an issue. So I'm not entirely sure if this one constituent will have the overpowering effect on whatever may happen if I'm lucky enough to be elected. But it is a situation where I'm not entirely. Look, I think I spoke to Norm earlier, which is one of the residents who's been very active on this, and he said, there's really no plan. Right. It's all ad hoc. It all seems to be haphazard. And if they have one, they haven't described it to a degree where it's well known enough that there's an understanding of the community of, okay, fine, this is where we're going. Okay. And in order for us to get there, this is what we're doing. It seems to be that every time, because of there's nothing wrong with developers in the sense that they're looking at their own self-interest, right?
Of course, that's their job.
That's their job.
That's your job, and then your job as the politician is to negotiate a good deal for us, the residents.
For us, the residents. Exactly. And the issue you have is you can't sit there as 5 members, theoretical representative of the people of Coral Gables, and just give away the farm. Yeah, no. Okay, you can't do that. You got 2 commissioners up there who are, I believe, fighting the good fight. Okay, you need a third. and
that's a good pitch. I got to tell you something. We have to wrap up, but that's a good pitch. And I wish you the best of luck in the election. I know you're hustling, and one thing I would say to you is, like, just watching you do your thing and your canvassing, like, you enjoy this. You enjoy public service.
I love this. This is a calling for me. This is not I'm not gonna say that, but I really truly enjoy this, and this is something I think if it's something you have a knack for, that you should definitely serve. You don't have to be elected. There are many ways to serve.
I love it. I appreciate you coming on, and you've been here at Community News a number of times, and I would encourage any of our listeners that want to get hold of you to get hold of you. You're very easy to find.
Yes.
And
305-519-5581.
I've never asked you a question you haven't been completely forthcoming, and I would encourage everyone to ask those questions. And
I want to tell everybody who I meet, you're not going to have to guess what I'm thinking, because I'm going to tell you. Okay. And sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. But you're going to get my perspective on what it is. And you may disagree with me, but you're getting the honest truth. You're not getting, somebody else's.
So call him, ask him the hard questions, and best of luck in everything.
Thank you very much, David.
All right, Dan.